Clear prop.
Star 73, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear Sutton. 1 Charlie Bravo, exit in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and its co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. This week is actually our first show where we're not going to talk about a prop. Well, we might talk about a prop. But this week we have the local guys from Houston, Texas that are responsible in some way for the Soaring clubs. Welcome to the show, Adam Harris and Michael Hunter. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming. I think Adam reached out originally some months ago as we asked for show ideas, and I've always wanted to take a ride. I have my own fears about gliding and stuff, but we'll one day get there. We've done a little prep for the show. I'm super excited about the conversation. There's a lot to learn. Wally, as we've talked about in previous shows, his father was a glider pilot in World War II and has some very interesting logbook entries from the days when his father was a glider pilot, and I have just been in a quick lesson about how much gliders have changed in those 80 years, and I'm excited to share some of this stuff with you guys. First, Adam Harris is a tow pilot at the Waller location. Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the glider world and what you like about doing in the glider world.
Absolutely, yeah. So I got my private certificate in Florida after I graduated from college. I went to A&M. Sorry about that, Bobby. And was moved back to Texas after a few years and was looking for opportunities to fly. And I fly out of LaPorte on the east side of Houston. And there was a sign there for the Greater Houston Soaring Association looking for tow pilots. So I contacted the email address that was on that flyer and began the training and got signed off as a tow pilot at the club. We're an all-volunteer organization, so I put my name on the roster and have been towing at the Greater Houston Soaring Association in Wallace for almost 3 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm a private single-engine land pilot. I've got just over 500 hours, and quite a bit of that time has been towing gliders.
Very interesting. Michael, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Michael Hunter. I was raised around aviation. My father was a helicopter pilot at first in the Army and then later for a company called Air America. I always wanted to become a pilot, but as life gets going and you have a family and trying to put kids through school and college and stuff. And when I finally got to the point where I didn't have much to do anymore, I looking around for something to do. And as fate would have it, a friend asked me to come out and take a glider ride at the Greater Houston Soaring Association, which happened to be just down the road from me. And I went out, took a ride, and I was about 300 feet off the ground. And I looked back at him and I said, "Sign me up." That was about 11 years ago, and I've got my private pilot's license about 8 months later. My commercial rating about a year and a half after that, and then just about 3 years ago, I got my instructor rating. So I also have a light sport rating. So I do fly some power, not a power pilot per se, private pilot, power pilot, but do have a light sport rating.
And how much of your, I guess, when you're working or at the club, you're an instructor, how much of that time are you giving dual instruction?
Most of my flying is instruction these days. I kind of been consumed by it. I'm also the current president of the Greater Houston Soaring Association. But so between the two, I don't get to do a lot of cross country and flying my own plane as much as I'd like, and that will change shortly. But yeah, so most of my flying is instruction. Awesome. I've got about 1,200 flights, instruction flights, and I've got about a little over 500 hours of flying, mostly gliders.
And so I guess let's start the conversation with misconceptions, because I know I started with a bunch of misconceptions right off the bat. What do us prop pilots and power pilots misconceive about the glider industry, the glider community, glider clubs, all that stuff? What do we mistake or have wrong?
Well, the first thing is that we are the best pilots.
I've heard that.
Just teasing. No, main misconception is that we just go up and we come straight down. And that's just not the case. We stay up for hours and hours and travel hundreds of miles. 300 kilometers is kind of a benchmark for glider pilots, and our glider pilots will do that during the year, more than once. So we fly anywhere from 4 to 5, 6 hours at a time. We stay up that long. So, and the other thing is they don't realize, like, for example, the glider record for height is 74,000, I believe it is 74,000 feet, 76,000, something like that. The Perlin project did that just recently in the last few years. So, I mean, gliders can go real high. I mean, my personal height is almost 18,000 because you can't go into 18,000 without permission. So we went to 17,900. Could have easily gone up higher than that. So, we people don't understand that gliders can fly long distances and stay up for a long time.
Wow, that is a number I was not expecting for sure. That's a you would have seen a lot of the Earth from up there.
Yep.
So you say you don't just go right up and come back right back down. I mean, obviously that's a skill you have to learn to find the thermals and those sorts of things. Obviously, there's some skill to that. How does a glider just not come down? I know they've got to be sophisticated, but you're doing some piloting to make sure you're staying in that. I call it warm air, but maybe not all thermals are warm. Tell us a little bit about how you do stay up.
So in this area, we use thermals to stay up, which is rising air. If you on a normal hot summer day and you look out and you see a cumulus cloud, that was formed by rising hot air. And so we will get in that air, and just like the birds, when you see the birds circling, we do the same thing. We'll just get in that thermal circle, and it'll take us up basically to cloud base. So that's how we stay up. So depending on the day, I mean, when we have monster days that are very powerful, it's easy to stay up. It's, you can thermal a picnic table. I mean, it's that easy. But the struggle is like this time of year when the thermals aren't as strong, but we still have them. That's when it becomes a little more difficult to stay up, and it takes some more skill to stay in the thermal and work the thermal and get to the altitudes and to be able to move on to the next thermal.
Very interesting. Adam, so we talked a little bit about you being a tow pilot, and we're a power pilot first. What maybe misconceptions do power pilots have about tow pilots? I know some people that have used that as a time builder to build time to go to the airlines. What else don't we know about tow pilots at soaring clubs?
I think one of the big misconceptions may be that you have to have a commercial rating to do it. And at least both the clubs in the Houston area are volunteer organizations. And with that, as a private pilot, I can tow gliders. So when I go out to the club, I'm volunteering my time. I'm not getting compensated for it, and I'm flying all day. During the summer, like Michael mentioned, when things are popping with the heat, with the summer heat, I routinely put 10 or 12 hours in the logbook. It is a lot of up and down. I never travel more than 2 miles or so away from the field, but it's time. And if anyone wants to look up the requirements, 6169 are the requirements to become a tow pilot. And the first two parts of that say that you have to have 100 hours total time in class and category and be signed off. So that I believe that's the biggest misconception, is that you've got to have your commercial rating to perform the tasks of a tow pilot.
And I guess it's common knowledge for me, but maybe not everyone knows it. Are every tow planes tailwheel draggers, or what? Are there other tricycle type planes that pull, or do you have to have a tailwheel endorsement?
For both the clubs in the Houston area, our club, the Greater Houston Soaring Association, we have two ag wagons that were made in the late 60s. And the Soaring Club of Houston has Pawnees. So in the Houston area, we've got an all taildragger fleet. I know that Bird Dogs L19s have been used for tow planes. I think Super Cubs have been used for tow planes in other parts of the country as well. But having that big engine that are in the Pawnees and the ag wagons make it a whole lot easier to get up to altitude and get back down.
Gotcha.
And they do use Cessna's regular tricycle gear, Cessna's at some clubs.
Okay.
It's not as common, but most of the time it's tailwheel.
All right. And so, Adam, you said altitude. I've obviously flown out by the Waller Soaring Club and been at the VOR Alpha approach many times, and we're flying at 2,000 feet, and I see gliders flying around me. What is the normal altitude that you would tow someone up and, I guess, cut the rope?
All right. Well, there's two types of tows that I'll perform. One of them is a pattern tow, obviously for pattern work. So we've got certain patterns that we will, or certain routes that we'll take depending on the conditions and the direction that we're landing. And if I'm taking a member up to altitude, it's usually 3,000 feet. Of course, during the summertime in the Houston area, when things are booming, they might get off earlier, and we'll communicate that on the ground what their intentions are before we get in the plane, or on the radio if it's a continuous operation. If I'm dropping somebody off and picking them up next, they'll let me know what altitude they want to get off at, and if they do get off early, then they'll just say thanks for the tow and off they go.
And I keep thinking of new questions, so forgive me, but who's making, I mean, you just said the pilot's making the decision. I'm assuming they're pulling a lever to let go of the cable or rope that they're tied to you on. Is that thing dangle behind your plane until you land? Do you have a mechanism that winches that in? What does that releasing process look like? Just because I have to understand how stuff works.
Right. So both aircraft have a release. The glider will have a release either on the nose or a hook beneath it on the undercarriage of the glider. And I have a hook on the back, just on top of and forward of the tail wheel. So that enables either party to release should there be an emergency, something not look right. If I have engine trouble, I can release them, they can release me, and we can go our separate ways. So, but under normal conditions, if it's a tow to altitude, then like I mentioned, we'll discuss ahead of time what altitude they'll be releasing at. Once we get to that altitude or whenever they feel comfortable, they'll pop it. I'll feel a little bump in my back. I know the glider's off. I verify that in the mirror, and I make my descending turn and separate. And
so the cable kind of stays out, or do you have a way to winch that thing in?
Oh yeah. So let's talk about the cable, or it's actually a rope. It's nylon. It's a synthetic material. There's the rope that gets used. The strength of it, the braking strength of it, is dependent upon the weight of the glider. So we've got two different tow ropes that we'll use depending on which glider I'm towing. So sometimes those have to get swapped out. It's 250 feet in length, and it remains behind me the entire time. The only time I would drop the tow rope would be if it was an emergency or if something was wrong on the tow plane and I needed to clear it out.
Multi-Perfect. Well, I've learned a lot today. So now teach me, how do I get my glider rating? I mean, I'm actually a multi-engine commercial pilot. I'm that guy who wants to keep getting better. I have heard becoming a glider pilot would make me much better at my stick and rudder skills. Tell me a little bit, Michael, if I called you up and said, hey, Mr. CFI, I'd like to give my rating, what would that process look like for a normal scenario, not an accelerated course or not somebody who just dabbles in it? What would that process look like?
Yeah. So if you come out to the club, we sign you up, and you're what we call a transfer pilot. And so the main thing about being a transfer pilot is you don't have to take the knowledge test. You just have to learn to fly the glider, learn all the emergency situations and how to react to them, and the basic cross-country skills, thermaling, and that sort of thing. And then you just take your test with a DPI, and you become a glider pilot. If you're a commercial rated pilot, you can come over and become a commercial rated glider pilot right off the bat. And we do have that. We just recently, back in, I think it was in September, we had a pilot that came over as a commercial pilot and went ahead and got his commercial rating and went straight to it. So it's a little bit easier when you're transferring over because you don't have to do the knowledge test part of it. But because you already have your basic skills, as far as airport signals and radio work and that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit easier. I find personally that there's two types of transfer pilots. There's ones that come in and struggle basically to learn the stick and rudder part of it. They don't put enough rudder in, they flare too high, that sort of thing. And then there's the ones that just pick it up right away. Tow is another one. Tow's a lot of transfer pilots have problems with tow, but there are some that just come in and get it right off the bat, and within about 30 flights, they're ready to take their test.
So gliders don't meet the regulation minimums either, much like in power plant. They never hit it at 35 or 40 hours for their private. They always need a little bit more time. Yeah,
exactly. And there are those rare occasions. We had a pilot, now one of our instructors, came over from, he was an airline pilot, and the guy just got it right off the bat. And I think he did his minimum 10 flights or so and got the DP out, got his license. He just got it,
Right.
But most of the time it's a little longer than that. And like I said, some people struggle with the tow, getting the tow down, and that takes, a handful, half a dozen flights before that starts to get a little better. We do have I don't want to call it a simulator because it's not really a simulator, but we do have a computer set up with a big, nice screen, and it's actually like a little cockpit of a glider, and you can practice some of those things on the ground before you go up. And we find that helps a lot.
Nice.
When people use that.
How many flights can you typically do in a day? Just average.
Well, if you're good, only one. You stay up all day.
Okay.
And that's the common. I mean, we have people that they'll leave at around noon and come down around 5:30, 6. But if all you're doing is like for instruction, if we're doing pattern tows, which is to 1,000 feet, which would be basically your in power would be your your takeoff and landing, go around and touch and goes basically. You can do those all day long and probably do 4 or 5 an hour. So, but just like when you're doing in power, you get tired and your skills start to degrade a little bit. But we'll do with students, especially when they're getting to that point where they just need to work on taking off and landing. We'll do 4 or 5, 6 of those in a row. And that's where the tow pilots really hone their skills, because you're taking off and landing a lot.
So ignorant question again, I apologize, but what would I use a commercial glider rating for other than instruction? Are there jobs in the glider world that I need a commercial rating for?
Actually, so at our club, in order to give people rides, and this is not required by the FAA, but we won't let you have to be a commercial pilot to give people rides. So we give a lot of rides at our club. Before COVID, we were doing 5 or 6 a day on average, both weekend days. Sometimes as many as 11, 12 in a day. I believe I'm pretty safe in saying this. We give more rides to people than any other club in Texas.
Wow.
There are commercial organizations, commercial companies out there that they're just a business, glider business. There's one out in Arizona and there's one in Florida. There's some out in California. They're scattered around the country. And you can actually make some money. I don't know about a living, but you can make some money being a commercial pilot and or an instructor at these organizations.
Gotcha.
But we just add that one level of safety. We just want our pilots that give people rides to be commercial rated pilots.
Makes sense. And then check ride, it's very similar. I go through a little bit of an oral exam. I got to do some skills in the glider with the designated pilot examiner, and then I get my certificate.
That's right. Exactly. It's pretty much the same. The oral exam is going to be a little different because it talks about obviously thermaling and cross country and no go and go situations and that sort of thing. But a lot of it's very similar.
And so Houston's a big city. I don't know what the rest of the country looks like, and it's hot here, and I guess we can glide year round for the most part. There's a club in Waller and Wallace. We keep talking about those cities. What does the national glider footprint look like? There's got to be hundreds of clubs and thousands of gliders. What would someone do if they wanted to get involved nationally in a glider world?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is go to the SSA Soaring Society of America site, ssa.org. And they're going to have a map on there, and that shows where all the glider clubs that are members are part of the SSA. And I would say 99% of all clubs are part of the SSA. And it's going to have a map showing you where the clubs are around the country. And you can pick out one closest to you. In the local area, depending on what part of town we find is where you live is where you end up going, because we're on the west side of Houston. We end up getting all the south end, Galveston, like LaPorte, where Adam was from, in that area. And we get a lot of that area in the west side of Houston, Katy, Sugar Land. A lot of our folks are from Sugar Land. That's where the majority of our people come from. And then the other club, which is up in Waller, they get the north side, Conroe, Woodlands, and all those little towns up in that way, Montgomery and stuff. So they end up getting a lot of that. Now there is some people that kind of cross over, but for the most part, that's where everybody, goes to, depending on where they live.
So let's hopscotch back to kind of the towing part a little bit. And obviously you use Adam in a tailwheel aircraft. He pulls you up to altitude and then you release and you go. There's got to be other ways for launching a glider. Talk about a few things that you shared with me before we started recording that I doubt the listeners really understand or know about. Yeah,
so there's what we call a winch launch. It's basically they used to use a cable, but I think they've gone to a rope system, a nylon rope system that breaks a little easier. It's basically a big drum that rolls up this rope really fast. And it's, the rope is 1,500 feet or at least 1,000 feet long. And you basically rocket ship up. You're going up nearly straight up. And when you get to the apex where the rope is now starting to pull in and going to start pulling you down, you release. And that's generally over 1,000 feet, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 feet. And I have actually not done a winch launch. I'm not certified to do winch launches. I'd have to get endorsement for that. But a lot of places over in Europe use winch launching. Here in the United States, we tend to do more because we have so much space. We do more aero tows, but yeah, and it takes you up, and then you got to catch the thermal to get away. But it's a cheaper way to get up in the air, and it's a fast way to get up in the air. There's also, believe it or not, car launches, auto launches. We've done some of those out at our field. We don't do them any longer, but it's the same concept. It's an auto with a automobile with 1,000, 1,500 foot rope on it, and just goes down the road and down the runway and pulls you up into the air. The other way that people get into the air is they have self launchers, and these are gliders that have engines on them. A lot of them, the engines come out of the fuselage right behind the pilot, will pop out and will actually launch the plane, get it up to altitude. Then they'll turn the engine off and the engine will stow away back into the fuselage. And the new systems are these systems called FES, which are electric work-off batteries. And they have a little prop right on the nose of the glider. Once you shut that off, the prop actually folds back to the side of the glider. It becomes part of the fuselage.
Wow, sounds like the future is here as it relates to some of those things. I think everyone's interested in where aviation takes on electric. Sounds like this would be a good first step for aviation and electric. But that also sounds very Tesla and expensive. Like, what are we talking about as it relates to gliders, and what would it take for Bobby to add one to United Flight Systems? Is it cheap? Is it comparable?
It's just like saying how much is a car, I guess. You can buy a glider for as cheap as $10,000. If that's where you want to go with it. If you want a decent glider, you're going to have to spend anywhere from $50,000 to and up. new gliders these days are $200,000 to $300,000. The high performance gliders that are coming out these days, these racing gliders and stuff, they're $200,000 to $250,000. And then there's some of the duo ships that are bigger gliders with big wings and stuff, and they're $300,000 to $400,000. And they can be expensive. In a lot of ways, it's more expensive than power flight, because you look online and you can get a decent little power plane, Cessna 170 or something, or 172 for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and gliders are much more expensive than that. If you get generally around $100,000, you're going to get yourself a pretty decent glider.
And I guess we know about Cessna, we know about Piper. Who makes gliders? Is there a big manufacturer here in the States, or is it kind of a Europe thing where they're made?
Yeah, there's no one in the United States, I don't believe, anymore that makes them. I may be wrong about that. But most of them are made in Europe. And there's a bunch of companies in Europe that make gliders. And then there's a newish company down in South Africa, Yonkers, who makes some of the finest gliders that are winning all the races these days, the JS series. And they're the ones that have the little jet engines that pop out of the back of the fuselage. And when you get low, you can pop that jet engine out and keep you up in the air. It's pretty cool. We have one of those at our field. Yeah, there's a number of companies out of Europe that make gliders.
What about avionics? Do these airplanes have navigation, or the gliders, do they have navigation systems, or is it just all pilotage? Yeah,
so most of us use these computers, glass, as you would call them in power planes. I use a navigation system called ClearNav, but the most popular one is called LX. It's an LX series, and it's basically the same. You put in where you want to go, and it tells you how high you have to be to get there. It gives you a lot of the gliding information. So at any time, I can look at the computer, and it'll tell me how far I can get to, what airports I have within gliding range. It'll give me my L/D, current L/D, and my average L/D for the flight, which lets me know whether I've been flying, efficiently or inefficiently. In my case, a lot of times. But they're just like the glass ships, like ForeFlight or any of those glass that you have in your airplanes or ForeFlight. But it's just made for gliders. And I think about those guys back 20, 30 years ago, before all this stuff was out, and they would fly the same things we fly today without any of that. They would have a sectional in their plane, and they would just take off. And it's amazing to me that they were able to do that. But yeah, we use computers, and also we like, for my plane has ADSB in, so I can see other airplane around me. And then I also have oh gosh, slipped my mind. What is it, Adam? The systems that we use to let other people that are around us know we're there.
FLARM.
Yeah, FLARM. Sorry for that. Yeah, we use FLARM it sends out a signal, and it's basically for other gliders to know where other gliders are. But ADSB can pick it up and lets them know that we're in the area.
Yeah, the FLARM is pretty cool because it's kind of like glider TCAS. So the gliders in the area are FLARM equipped. They can all see and avoid each other electronically.
Yeah, and it tells us where they are, if they're above us or below us, and that sort of thing. So it does help. Although I think when it first came out, a lot of people heads were in the cockpit, and we trained to keep your head out of the cockpit. And we're starting to do that more now. We just kind of listen to the sounds that are being made by the computer to let us know when something's going on.
I gotta say again, I was ignorant to all this stuff. I thought you just had a string on top of your cockpit there. It sounds like it's pretty sophisticated stuff nowadays.
Well, we do have the string.
You still have the string.
We still have the string, the yaw string. Yeah. And it is one of the most important pieces of equipment you have on the glider. I actually had my yaw string fall off in the middle of a flight, and I felt like I was a naked or something. But yeah, it lets you know if you're flying coordinated, which is like the ball in a power airplane. But you don't need the ball because you don't have an engine that's blowing that string around. So we use the string. Yeah, the yaw string.
I assumed it was the slip indicator for you, much like the ball. So
in instruction, after you've done your checklist for landing, we teach speed yaw string. Keep the yaw string straight and keep your speed, at a set speed, whatever you've set it at.
Right. So I know it's a finer skill, or you have to learn how to fly by the seat of your pants in a glider. How? If you could, tell us a little bit about how you learn to find the thermal, what's telling you you're in a thermal, how do you know to stay in or get out of the thermal? I'm sure it's an acquired skill, but for us that don't understand it, and you're saying you stay up 5 or 6 hours at a time, you got to have tools or help with some of that, I would think.
Yeah, so finding the thermal is the first skill. Like I was saying earlier, the cumulus clouds are made by thermals. It's rising air from the ground, and it hits the dew point and turns into a cloud. So we look for, if it's a cloudy day like that, a cumulus cloud day, we look for those clouds. Not all clouds have thermals under them though. And it's a skill of finding the thermal. But once you find the thermal, then it's another skill of staying in the thermal and circling in the thermal. We call it thermaling. And that is another skill that just takes time. And I don't think you ever get perfect at it. I think it's something you're always striving to get better at. Coring the thermal so that it's working the best you possibly can. It can work for you, getting up as high as you can with it as quickly as possible. So we'll look for that. One of the big indicators for us is other gliders, of course. If you see them circling, you know that there's one there. But birds. If you see I've been saved so many times by birds. I've been getting low and look out, and there'll be a bunch of birds circling, and I know there's a good thermal there. They always can pick out the best thermals.
Smoke too. I look for smoke when I'm towing because my members paying for a flight. I don't want to dump them off in a bunch of sink. They want to be in lift. So I'll look for smoke. Take a look at where the smoke is lifting and blowing. I'll also, like Michael said, look for big flocks of birds. We've got lots of turkey vultures in southeast Texas, so they like to circle, and I'll pay attention to where they are and head to where they're located and drop people off.
I guess, is it a friendly crew? Like people share where the thermals are at, or is that like a secret, Michael? If you find a big, fast, good one, do you try and disguise it, or do you say, "Hey guys, come over here to such and such, and let's climb together"?
So it depends. If you're just out having fun for the day, yeah, you'll tell someone, "Hey, over here, just south of the field, I've got a monster thermal." But if it's a contest, no, you're not going to share that. But I've done some contest flying. I haven't done any in a while. It's been a few years since I've done any contest flying, but it's a whole nother part of gliding where these, 20, 30, 40 gliders, and even more sometimes, will fly the same task. And it's basically the one that can get around the task the fastest. So yeah, you when you're in contest, you don't really tell anybody else, but they'll see you thermaling, and it's kind of like, it's a magnet. All of a sudden you look around, you've got 10, 15 other gliders circling around with you, so, which is a whole nother skill set, flying with gliders that close to you. Yeah. I'm still not comfortable with that.
Yeah. Those birds do it all the time, and you're surprised they don't clip each other's wings and fall out of the sky. But, again, they're doing it every day, all day. So they're pretty skilled at it. What does a guy like me do, or a pilot that is interested in taking the next step? How does someone go from a private pilot power rating, or maybe I'm just interested in learning how to be I want to learn how to be a glider pilot. So I look up on you said the website was ssa.org. I find a school.
Yeah. If you're looking for around the country, ours is houstonsoaring.org, houstonsoaring.org.
All right.
And, So yeah, you come out, join the club. We're an all volunteer situation, so you do have to volunteer once a month. But other than that, you come out, get your lessons, get your rating. We have I don't want to say a lot, but we have a fair number of airline pilots that come out and get their glider ratings. And that's all they did. That's all they wanted to do was just get their glider ratings, know how to do it, understand it. Some of them stick around. Others will just know that they have that in their back pocket. We're all familiar with Sully, the movie Sully, and of course the Miracle on the Hudson. And, when you dig a little deeper, he was a glider pilot. And there's been a number of instances where airline pilots have had to land their planes in different situations, in emergency situations, and they're glider pilots. A lot of them that are successful at doing it. A friend of mine's engine just quit near Hempstead, and it was about, I guess it's a few years ago now, but he was a glider pilot and he just put it into a field, when he's flying his power plane. So it changes your perspective of landing out and that sort of thing. So yeah, just come out, sign up, and get and start taking lessons.
Perfect. We will put all the details in the show notes and make sure everybody can get access to the items we've talked about. Any links on maybe the avionics and stuff, we'll put that in there as well, and definitely highlight the Soaring Club here in Houston and the national organizations. I look forward to taking my introductory flight. I can't wait to hear how silent it is. I think that's what I'm most excited about when I do get to take my first trip up. As always, whether you're in a powered aircraft or in a glider, fly safe, and in most cases, stay behind the prop. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.